Welcome, everyone. I'd like to thank Judy for joining us this evening, and also my wing woman angel in the background, Stephanie, who is managing the tech. Most of you who know me, Elizabeth Cowderara of the Hummingbird Bridge, know that's not really my zone of genius. So, Judy, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Judy is a fabulous mindfulness and meditation teacher. She's a shamanic practitioner like myself. She follows the Celtic path, so close to my heart also. And she's also a Reiki master. She has another string to her bow, which she may well tell you about later. But Judy, thank you very much for joining us. Now, tell us a little bit about how you got into what you're doing now.
Well, it was an evolution rather than a single defining moment, which I think is where perhaps some of the best things come from. Um, because it evolved and I've evolved, which is lovely. So I think as a child, I always had a passion for nature, always had an interest. I loved being outside. I was very fortunate where I grew up. There was a lot of green space where I was able to run around, climb trees, ride bikes, and that's always been in my heart. Then you become an adult and you have responsibilities and you get kind of first job really all the way through my studies. I kept that interest. And then all of a sudden, first job, responsibilities, and I just stopped connecting with nature. I started to see winter as a horrible thing and something to be feared and dreaded, and let's chase the lightness and the joy of summer. And as that happened, I started to experience a lot more stress in my life. I suddenly found the pressures of day-to-day life getting on top of me, and with promotions, with new opportunities. By the time I'd reached my mid-20s,
Right.
I was close to reaching burnout.
Mm.
Even though, yeah, those of you who listen with children, young children, caring responsibilities, and the responsibilities I've had, from my 30s, 40s, and onwards have been far, far worse than those of my 20s. But at the time, I wasn't using any tools. I didn't have any tactics. The employer I had said, "Oh, we'll give you some coaching. That'll help you." Um, and it didn't really. It helped me in my day-to-day job, but it wasn't what I needed. And then I found a meditation class. And I thought, oh, this sounds interesting. It's at a cafe I like in Chesham. And I thought, oh, this sounds like something. And it all of a sudden I was learning a technique that I could apply myself. It didn't need anybody else. Yes, the weekly practices and the sessions really helped. Half the sessions we ended up practicing outside, and we ended up exploring the world, and we'd have a short walk up the hill, and we'd stand and actually do meditation practices based in Tai Chi and Qigong, which is all involves very gentle movement with a meditative approach. And I felt like a piece of me was coming back.
Mm.
Um, and from then, I knew that I wanted to explore this more. Within a few years, I realized I wanted to explore this so much that I wanted to find a job where I could study. So I managed to set myself up in my early 30s as a freelance PR professional so that I could work 4 days a week doing PR and 1 day a week doing something with meditation, but it also meant I could study. Around that time, I met Elizabeth, and that also came at a time when I was going through a relationship breakup. And Elizabeth sort of saw something in me that was missing, and offered a shamanic healing, and it was an amazing experience. At the same time, I was going to a Celtic connection group that I'd found in my exploration and meditation. It was called Celebrating the Seasons, but in actual fact was a very gentle introduction to the Celtic wheel. And because I embraced it so fully, I was also invited behind the scenes to things that were, let's come up, get up for the sunrise for a particular occasion. Let's go and watch the sunset. And I suddenly felt I'd found a community that I'd come home to, and it was like remembering part of yourself. It was like it wasn't new. And that's what is been so special. The same with meeting Elizabeth. It wasn't new. It was a remembering. There's a heartfelt, soulful connection where I knew this beautiful goddess before. And yeah, that feels amazing and interesting. And that was before I even sort of opened into wider spirituality. I wasn't even sure what, recognition of past lives was. Thought it was all a bit weird and woo-woo. And each step opened me to seeing a new way of being, just as when you're learning science when you're age 11, you suddenly open, okay, and certain things click into place. Science may not be your thing. It may be the passion of suddenly learning Shakespeare, or suddenly cracking algebra in maths. Whatever is your passion, or was the thing that you got into. Maybe it wasn't at school. Maybe it was later when you realized that academic learning can be hard, but having a lust for knowledge and learning in life. I was just talking to a friend about this today, who's in her 50s. She's suddenly developed a passion for learning. And she said, I never thought of myself as academic, but I realized there's a difference between what school expects in academia and and how I can realize that learning can bring me joy and bring me fun, as well as learning amazing things. She's been studying lots around children's mental health. So
That,
yeah,
that
hopefully that gives you an overview.
Yes, that's fantastic. Thank you. Yes, it's your gift of expression has never changed, Judy, and it always I admired it when I first met you. You talked about children, and I know you have a son. And how do you manage what you're doing with the spiritual disciplines and your child? Do you find that he loves what you're doing? Does he get involved with what you're doing? Or
Yes and no, which is quite worth remembering, and accepting that your child's journey or children's journey is their own. The same with a partner. They may not join your journey, or they may not be at the same speed as you. And that can be frustrating sometimes because you want to kind of bring your community along, but sometimes can bring you joy and learning in other ways. Let me explain a little bit more. So I took my meditation from being something I was passionate about, but not had I was doing regularly, but not daily. It changed when I got pregnant. I thought this is an opportunity to really use the tools of this practice to help me at this time of my pregnancy. And to if I'm going to embrace a daily practice, now's a perfect time. I was also exploring hypnobirthing because of a close friend's experience and how that relaxed mindset had actually saved her life in a stressful situation in the birth of her first child. And I thought, well, this has got to be explored. And part of that was practicing daily meditation and affirmations. So it got more serious when I was pregnant. Obviously, then you have a baby and you realize it's really hard, all
Yeah.
this juggle. So
Mhm.
I had to be quite gentle with myself and realize actually my daily meditation practice went out of the window until my son was in a better routine. But I immediately noticed the difference when I wasn't practicing those positive affirmations, when I wasn't making time or being able to find the time for those meditation practices. And my partner as well was saying, can we help you get back to that? Because I notice a difference in you. I notice it helped you. What can I do?
Mhm.
And that, was a wonderful conversation and really where it started to change. And then he would have the baby for a certain amount of time when he came home, and I would get a 20 minutes of pure bliss to myself when I would meditate and not be disturbed no matter what. And then from that, I started to set a precedent. I got in, found my love of daily meditation practice. But instead of where most people it'd be a morning routine, mine was in the evening. Mine was when hubby is home from work, or slightly earlier, perhaps on a weekend, and he would take the baby and I would have that time to reclaim myself. Interestingly, following the Celtic wheel was easier to keep up with a baby, easier to get up for a sunrise, easier to honor that, easier to kind of go, oh, let me notice that it is the 1st of February, it is Imbolc, it is a celebration of spring. And I started looking for groups because we'd moved away from Buckinghamshire, where I could reconnect. And that started a discovery of new places, new people, and an awakening of Berkshire and South Oxfordshire and opportunities
Oh, good.
there. Um,
Oh,
and then I just started getting into, a regular meditation practice. And as my son got older, he would come to know that this is mummy's meditation time. Um, when he was little, it would be really lovely because he'd come downstairs out of bed and he'd be like, oh, mummy's meditating. And he would literally crawl and sit on my lap to be close to me. And he would know, sometimes he'd try to disturb me, but I'd be very focused as I meditated outside in the warmer weather or when it's not pouring like it is tonight. He would come out with me. He'd enjoy having his feet on the earth. As he's got older, our rapport with meditation has changed. And he's going through his own tween age transitions now. So I'm seeing a shift. But the important thing is to encourage him, teach him positive practices, but not force it down
oh,
his throat. Um, to let him find his own way, to lead by example rather than by force. That's my belief, and that's my parenting style, which I recognize isn't right for everybody, but that's how it's worked for us.
so it's a matter of releasing and waiting for them to return, if indeed they do, if
Yeah.
in that way. You have worked with people who have been distressed, and also I believe you've got some teenagers as well that you work with now, haven't you?
Yeah.
Because I've had the privilege of working or attending some of Judy's work at a place called Path Hill. You're terribly um, patient with me because I got lost. And
You did well.
you have to walk in a particular way to this wonderful opening where she had her ceremony, where she was holding her ceremonies. So yes, it's a beautiful place, and if you have an opportunity, do attend. I'm sure you're going to be telling people about what you are up to there, if that's all right with you. Now
Absolutely.
you've told us about what you do, how you manage your mothering. Um, Tell me, you have another profession, as you've
I
mentioned, your
do, yes.
relations profession. How do you mold those two parts of yourself together, or do you keep them separate? Because how do those you work with see the Judy who I know as well as the professional Judy? How does that work for you?
Well, interestingly, when I first began this journey, I kept the two parts of myself very separate. I would have a LinkedIn persona, and very much the social media channels is a good way to describe it. And I'd have the persona that my clients would see, that would be dressed in a certain way, my hair in a certain way, um, conforming in a certain way, and talking about the things that my clients were interested in, and sharing very little of me. That's how I began.
How does
And
that
then I
feel?
would
Ask you, how did that feel when you had that split between?
actually, in some ways, it felt quite healthy.
Mhm.
There were some good things about the rituals around that. There was a clarity of this is my PR. It helped me kind of go from PR mode to meditation teacher mode. It helped kind of close one door and open another. Um, but part of me was not being truthful to myself. Um, and that's okay. Yeah, some of that was naivety and caring too much about what other people thought. And now that sounds really discompassionate. I do care greatly, but
Yes, I know that.
but there is an extent of caring so much that you devalue yourself.
Mm.
Um, so what happened was quite organically, um, I realized in one of the clients I was working with that their brainstorming meetings, when we were trying to get creative ideas out, were always a little bit awkward. It was really difficult getting people out of whatever they've been focusing on to come and be creative. And we've got 15 minutes to come up with the best idea ever, and you've got to do it on demand.
Mm.
And I just thought, do you know what? If I could just do a meditation with this crowd, if I could help them by guiding them into a process. And I asked them, would they be willing to try an approach? I didn't call it meditation.
What did you call
Um,
it? What did you call it?
I just said, I've got a brainstorming technique that
Ah,
I
yes.
think will help
Mhm.
everybody switch off from what they've been doing and be more creative. That's simply what I called it. About the same time, unbeknownst to me, Google was doing this in their offices. Google was formally instilling meditation practices into meetings, saying, right, we're going to have a 1 minute meditation before we begin to help people shut down from what they've been doing and open to the focus of this meeting. I found that out later at a networking meeting with Google, and it's like, oh, okay, so we're thinking the same way. Um, and it worked. It was so effective. Then people were curious. They asked me questions, and how did you learn that? And oh, well, have learned meditation, and I'm still learning meditation, and it's something I'm interested in, and this is based on one of those principles. And oh, it's kind of like a coaching exercise, but oh, I thought meditation was what we do at the end of yoga. That's really interesting how you bring that in a different way. And because I'd opened a conversation quite organically, I then started to open and show my other faces, kind of reveal what was behind the mask sometimes. Um, And people responded really well to it. Instead of it being something where people were like, oh, there's the weirdo hippie in the corner, it was like, oh, no, this Judy's interesting and I'm curious about this. And it was something to talk about, but to balance it, just as somebody who might be passionate about a crafting activity or their weightlifting, sometimes you'll want to ask them loads about it because it's fascinating, and other times you don't want them shoving it down your neck because you just need to get on with work. And I think I'd always recognize that, I'm not that kind of person who's bragging about trips to various stones or enlightening experiences, but I'm willing to talk if somebody is curious, and I'm happy to be open. So there's a difference, I suppose. Now it's changing again with the way social media is, and I'm being more willing to put my face forward to kind of say, actually, this is who I am, and this is why it matters. And this is why, in the balance of juggling motherhood, of juggling a relationship that I want to flourish, in juggling work and different relationships, why I need to find balance, and why, even with all this experience of meditation and Reiki and shamanic practice, I find it hard. And here's things that I've tried, or something that I've learned, and something that I've just found out from reading something this week. And I want to share and show my ongoing development and learning to, I hope, inspire others.
I remember someone telling me that we're spiritual beings in a human body, and it's such a heavy thing to be carrying around. But that when you express, as you have, the way that we think and that we work with our lives in a way that is practical, and they see results, as you have just expressed, the people you're working with, it opens little doors for them of curiosity. And perhaps what you have done is what you had done, of like, I've come home, this feels right, this feels right. So I'm thrilled to hear that you had that experience. I really am. And what is it that you wish to do with that work in the future?
So I've got several things that I am hoping to see come into place. I absolutely love the work that I do with adults, and I want to help that to flourish. I really want to help people of all ages discover the joy of what I call a journey with the sun and the moon. And this is tapping into a greater connection to the seasons, the sun and the cycle of the sun, understanding the sun and the different points of light and how that affects us in all parts of our work, and the moon cycles too. As much as it's seen as witchy and mythology, there's some fascinating science about how planting with the cycles of the moon will help different plants grow. I saw it in my 30s when I was working at the RHS, the Royal Horticultural Society, and they tried to disprove some of the stuff that was done in French agriculture about planting in certain moon cycles, and they realized, oh, there's something in this old tradition. We don't really know why. I'm not sure of the science of it yet.
I think the Aboriginals would have a word about that.
But it works. But what I love, and more we're seeing how science is coming together. Science is proving, meditation that indigenous cultures have known for tens of thousands of years. However, science is now proving it. Science is challenging different things.
Western intellect is sort of saying, oh, yes, oh, thank you very much.
And I'm loving the way of bringing these things together. So helping more people discover how that journey together helps with anxiety, helps find a better balance in life, helps you reconnect to wonder in everyday life rather than feeling like you're on the treadmill of life and you're only living for your holidays, you're only living for the weekend. Actually, wouldn't it be great to live life every day? If lockdown taught us anything, it was about the preciousness of simplicity, the preciousness of connection and the people we love, the preciousness of the time we have here on this planet in these bodies.
Very short.
And yeah, so I want to continue to explore doing that and to reach more people through online workshops, through my face-to-face workshops, and through a book that I'm writing. And my next project is then to take that in a more formal way to teenagers. So although I've worked with younger children, although I've worked with older children, I notice a real gap in support for teenagers. There's now loads and loads of opportunities for younger children, but at teenage, all the provision seems to stop. And I'm not just talking spiritual. I'm talking youth clubs, I'm talking youth support, I'm talking anything that is outside school. There is a big lack of support. There
Cutting
is
back on
also,
art as well, aren't they? They're cutting
yeah,
back on anything to do with creativity.
there's also a mental health crisis. I studied a qualification in children and young people's mental health this year, and one of the things that came out of it is that they're expecting 70% of children who are currently aged between 11 and 17 to experience something that is classified as a serious mental health episode in their lives, probably within the next few years. 70% are expected. That's a phenomenal number. We already hear loads of people will know, the difficulties in CAMS, children and adolescent mental health services, of getting an appointment, of getting support. Anybody who's struggling with a child who is exhibiting neurodiversity, challenges and behaviors will know that there's a 2-year plus waiting list on assessments. So people are having to invest in a private assessment. I saw something just this week of my local secondary school, which has been famed for having an amazing support unit for pupils with additional learning support needs. They're just they're just questioning at the local authority whether or not they can cut that because of the lack of funding coming from government. It's like, oh my goodness, this is something that you need more than ever, and they're going to cut it. So there's a lot of worried parents, and as much as they may not show you, worried children, worried young people. And I've had, Elizabeth will understand this, what I call a spiritual nudge, a tap on the shoulder that said, you need to do something. I've no idea quite how it's going to take shape. I've run a couple of pilots so far, and they've been amazing. And I particularly was targeting children with anxiety around transitions when they've gone back to school, or when they've started a new school. So dealing with year 6, so age 10 and above.
How do you
But
do that?
really,
How do you, when you say you're dealing with them, I mean, clearly you're passionate about this, and that's amazing. That's fantastic and wonderful, as you know, my background with that element that it's, but I'd love to know what you are doing with them, and what is it that has linked you directly with an empathy with how they're feeling.
so 2 things. I have an 11-year-old son, so it aligns with his transitions. I have been supporting a child, I think you may have even met him, who I began working with when he was 9. He's now 17, nearly 18. And he was having a lot of anxiety at school, a little bit of trouble connecting, because he's quite bright, and a lot of the other children find that a threat and don't like that, and he was getting bullied because of it. And really, since he was 9, he discovered the meditation work that I was doing, was interested. I was doing some work with young people, and he came along and was fascinated. And I've ended up supporting him on a one-to-one basis through his exams, through incredible anxiety and lockdown, and kind of seeing his transition. And his experience has made me want to support other children. I
Has that
have.
been done through meditation, Judy? Has that been
So
done?
it began through meditation and coming along to children-focused meditation workshops, but it's evolved, particularly when you work one-to-one, with both him and his mum. It's evolved into, it is meditation, but it's also the shamanic work. It's energy work. It's understanding. This is where meditation is different to mindfulness. A lot of mindfulness is exploring particular techniques that help you be more mindful of the moment, be more aware of what's happening. And I use loads of these. Meditation, people tend to think, is just listening to somebody telling you a lovely story and you drifting off to sleep or somewhere else, which is a wonderful part of it. The other part is more a coaching element, a guiding, an energetic, a pausing to notice actually somebody, they may not even be able to articulate it, but what's happening when they pause. I can see a tension in their face. I can see them holding their hands tight. I can see their bodies resisting this invitation to pause and relax. Something is going on, and it's about working very intuitively, and the Reiki's really helped with this, to kind of notice and help ask the right questions that respond to what's going on in you now. So people watching this can kind of notice, how are you feeling as you listen to me? What's happening? What's triggering for you? How is your mind wandering to other places? A lot of the techniques I've focused on with this boy have been to help with neurodiversity issues and focus. So that's where it began. But it's evolved. And it's become about coaching techniques. It's become about understanding energy and confidence. And I want to ripple that out.
Yes, Judy.
So at the moment, I'm using Path Hill because I am finding that being outside in nature, Path Hill, I should say, is an outdoor activity centre, and I focus on using a space which has a shelter, but it is still an open-sided shelter. So we would be protected from the rain, have a big fire, but we would still be experiencing the elements. So when it's cold, you would know it's cold. You would have to wrap up warm. At the moment, I'm using Path Hill. I'm exploring the possibility of an indoor space. But what I really like about the opportunity at Path Hill is nature is a leveler. Nature is a connector, and so many young people are not spending time in nature. They've become disconnected from the planet they're part of, yet many of them feel passionately and confused about the anxiety they feel about the planet. It's helping them get back to being part of it by just pausing and noticing the trees, the seasons, the wildlife they can hear in the woods around them. And then some of them start to notice more. You start to be able to observe different things, rekindle that childlike wonder that they had when they were little, through different activities. And then instilling the importance of ritual, which sounds a bit strange, but
Not
rituals that are supportive, and that as a society we've forgotten these old rituals. Adults find it so useful, but the children even more so. We were working with some the other day at a new moon and kind of saying traditionally the new moon was all about wishes because the stars are more visible. We wish upon a star and we use this time for wishing. However, before we set our wishes in place, we remember to be grateful. To be grateful for all that we have, and we write our wishes on paper and burn them, but we write them in a bed of gratitude. And all these children were responding so positively. They liked the fact, being tween age, sort of 10 plus, that it was private. They didn't have to share it with anybody. It wasn't a PHSE lesson where they've got to talk to their neighbour and share. It's very private. We did an exercise with burning the stuff we want to get rid of on the fire with some 11-year-olds just after they'd started the transition, and them having the freedom that if they want to swear into that stick, I'm not going to tell them off.
No.
I'm going to allow them just enough freedom of expression within a safe container. And I guess that's what I'm trying to do, provide the safety, the structure of very simple techniques, but that allow them enough freedom to start to find out who they are, and ask the right questions. I would like, as it goes through, to start exploring, what's happening for them physically, separating into groups where they may want to talk more intimately, girls to girls, boys to boys, non-binary people within their community, to kind of recognize, actually, I don't identify as a girl, I don't identify as a boy. Oh, but there's somebody else like this, or Judy will hold the space for me and know that it's okay for me to be this. I
There's a
can be.
wildness about being in nature, isn't there? Which
Yeah.
speaks to everybody, include, but more so the teenager, because they're finding their way in life. They don't know where the edges are, where they end and where life begins. And because, as you say, so few have an opportunity to be out in nature, truly out in nature, and recognize what's going on around them. It's wonderful. Did I dream it, or did you work at some with some mental health charities? Was that, because I remember seeing your, was that right, or
So I have worked with some mental health charities, but it's more on the PR side.
Okay.
Although interestingly, one of the services I offer for businesses is where they have had training in mental health first aid, very often through one of the great mental health charities like Mind. Very often what happens, particularly in smaller businesses, they train one person to be the guru of mental health first aid, or the chief exec is passionate about it. So they're their mental health first aider. But when something happens, either nobody is confident to go to that person because they're too high up and they feel afraid of how they will be judged, or they do go to that person, like one of the ladies who I spoke to who said, I've suddenly got 110 staff coming to me out of 200 going, I'm stressed, I'm worried, and I don't know what to do with them. I can, offer them a workshop, I can offer them tips. But if that was physical first aid, you would have some help. You'd call 999. You would get a paramedic support.
So
You would
I
do the
called Judy.
basics.
I called
Um,
Judy.
and so what I do is I'll work with other charities, and I bring in, and one of the things I do is I run a regular membership group that I call the Mindful Leaders Club. And people who are passionate about well-being within their business come along. One is a FD, a financial director, and she's passionate about helping the staff of her business, or what's part of her business, to work better, and she cares about them because she knows it makes a difference to the numbers, being financial director, but she also cares about people and she wants to show that. But the issues we've been able to discuss behind closed doors, because it's not a sales type meeting, we can talk about, how do you deal with racism? How do you deal with diversity issues? Now, a black and white HR may say, oh, someone's been racist, you sack them. That's a very black and white answer. Somebody else will say, but they're brilliant at their job. And if I sack 50% of my staff and I have no business tomorrow, is that the right thing? Can I educate people? I know it's wrong, but can I take them on a journey to change the way they work? And what I love about that is, well, one business will say, I'm sacking everybody with that viewpoint. Another business is saying, I'm going to try and educate and change and support my staff. They can argue and say, my way is right and my way is right. But the truth is, each business will make it their own choice, just as we make our own choices, hearing the bombarding advice for life. We need to find our own path, and that's what the support group is all about, how you can do that in a business context, which again brings those different avenues together.
How do you balance that life? Because I'm sure there are some people who are listening who are curious about that. And I think I know there's going to be some people who are going to be listening later on, who themselves are in the caring profession. How do you find the balance, find the sort of the equilibrium within yourself to do the work that you do at Path Hill with the teenagers, and the work that you do with the business community, where you are, from what I can hear you saying, and I'm thrilled to hear it, that you are opening their eyes to another way of managing their emotions and managing the way that they work with other people. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, definitely. And then there's the in-between stuff with people of all walks of life, of all adults.
How do you split your time then? How do you, or it's not split, but how do you
So
divide your time?
So there is a bit of a split, and it depends with my work in PR. There's peaks and troughs. There'll be contracts that suddenly make me very busy, which mean, oh, I don't have as much time to run youth groups, so I need to plan in when I'm going to schedule them. I'm quite disciplined around the Celtic wheel. That's really important to me. And it's becoming more important to the people who I support. So I set certain dates. I'm not available around these dates that happen to be Halloween or Samhain, because I'm running some workshops, because I know I will be needed then. I'm not available for certain things at the summer solstice, and certain times I'm not available around Yule because I am doing certain things. And they are as religious as birthdays, holidays, they are firm dates that are in my diary, and I stick to that.
It's filling your container, it's filling your cauldron of
Yeah.
life. Otherwise, as I often say to people, and if you don't get your own oxygen mask on first, how are you going to help anybody else around you? And I know
The other thing that's really helped me is time with you and people like yourself, and to recognize. So each month, as well as scheduling in my PR time for my clients, my meditation activities, and the admin and marketing you have to do around that, I schedule in my support time. So I do activities that support me. Yes, some of it is daily meditation, some of it is daily exercise, some of it is booking in time with friends and experts. And you have to be strict with yourself. Excuse me.
Are we back?
Thank you. Yes,
Uh,
sorry,
I,
I muted so that I wouldn't cough, and then
I was very impressed because I'm not in. I'm absolutely certain I couldn't have done that.
I,
I'd have just been coughing, Judy. So thank you for that.
I thought I would do that. So sorry,
Was
sorry
that
for that.
no, don't apologize. Was that your headphones or was that something you pressed on the
No,
computer?
I pressed on the computer
Ah,
to mute,
okay,
and then
okay.
I
I'm
had to
sure.
get the
I'm sure.
wonderful Stephanie to let me back in because
I'm sure Stephanie's. Oh, there she is. Yes, thank you, Stephanie. Thanks, Steph.
Thank you.
Well, as we're sort of nearing the end of our conversation here, I mean, I could talk to you all night, and I probably will have a little nap after we finish. But your the work that you do is so wonderful and so needed. And you do it so well. And what I need to say to everybody who's listening is that Judy's been very kind and has given us the gift of one of her meditations. That's right, isn't it?
I
And I'm
have,
sure
yes.
link my wing woman angel tech fab person who I work with, Steph, will be able to make sure that you all get that. So thank you very much, Judy. It's really kind of you. What I'd like to say is that such a wonderful, soulful, connected, kind, compassionate individual like yourself is someone who is so needed in the world right now. There are so many challenges and as you say, if you said quite rightly, anxieties that our youth have. Does that sound terribly patronizing? You know what I mean? Younger people, teenagers,
We all
and,
have.
and beyond. But yes, uh, because they are our future. And
Yeah.
if they're going to doctors and saying I'm anxious, can you just give me something to stop me being anxious? That's just starting them on the path of when they're not in that space, thinking, well, what do I do now? And becoming the adult who doesn't have a quiet time in their mind ever. So I thank you for that, Judy. It's a fantastic work, and I can't wait to hear more about your plans. And yes, that tap on the shoulder, that sort of pop in coming from whoever is supporting you outside there, that says you've got to do this. That you know you're more than capable of steaming ahead with that. And whatever I can do to help you in that path, I'm there, right there for you. In fact, there's a lady I'm thinking of who I think you would work, spark each other because of something that she does. So we'll have a conversation about that another time. Now, would you like to tell us how what is your favorite kind of meditation? What do you find, and how long do you take to do your meditation? I know I've experienced it, but when you're talking about doing meditation for yourself, what's the time span? Because I'm, it's not about sitting on mountains and going on and not having anybody else around you, because there are people that open doors if they forget you're meditating. How do you do that? How do you meditate every single day without fail? And how long do you
There's
give?
3 things I do. So one thing is I look for little opportunities, and this will vary throughout my day. I recently, and I've just finished one round, but I may do more, have been chasing the sunrise. It's really easy at this time of year, super easy, because the clocks, even with the clocks changed, it's quite late. You don't have to get up at some ungodly hour to chase the sunrise. And I've been making sure that amidst the busyness of getting ready for work and getting ready for the school run, at the time of the sunrise, even if it's grey outside, even if it's raining, I open the back door and I step outside for a few minutes. And by a few minutes, I mean no more than 5. And I pause and I stop. I close the door on the melee of breakfast and getting ready. And I just notice what I notice. I've also been sharing that with one of my meditation groups, and I found it really interesting that sometimes on the grey days, I notice more than on a day when you have a pink sunrise. Because I can't see so much, I'm more aware of the birds. I'm more aware of how green the grass is, or how vivid a leaf will be that's fallen on the floor. I may pause and notice how wet my face is and the pitter-patter of rain on my coat. And it's those little moments, consciously taking time. I try to make a point every day, no matter how busy I am, even if I'm working through lunch, of getting outside at some point in the day. Again, it might only be for 5 minutes. I try to take a walk, but sometimes it can't happen in the busyness of the work schedule. And again, just taking time to be outside, even if it's a walk around the block and it is quite urban, quite built up, or it's a walk in my little garden. What I do, particularly at this time of the year, I try to find all the colours of the rainbow. I look for, okay, where's a red? It might just be spotting cars. Particularly when the day is grey, I love it because you suddenly go, oh, I found red. Oh, I found blue. And it's very childlike and it just brings me back. Sometimes it's as simple as when you make a cup of tea and pause. Loads of people have a ritual in their morning coffee, and actually pausing to be present to that coffee. The other thing I do is I consciously make time. It used to be in the morning with school routines changing. I now do it later in the day. And for me, it's a switch off. It's a transition between kind of mum and all the busyness and then pausing and having some kind of me time. Sometimes it's some Netflix and chill. Sometimes it's reading a book. But it's that conscious notice that, okay, now I've finished with that, I'm going to have 20 minutes for me. And I put on a piece of meditation music, or I set a timer and I time my 20 minutes and I do a particular breathing exercise, which is often as simple as breathing in for 4, holding for 3, exhaling for 5, and repeating that 108 times.
Well,
Sounds,
hardier than I am, because when I go out in the morning, I take an umbrella if it's raining, but I still hear the pitter pat.
yeah. So that's 2 things. The third thing I do, which I mentioned earlier, is to make sure every month I have some date for me, a self date. If you've read Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way, something that fuels me. For me, it is often geared in meditation. For somebody else, it might be going to an art gallery on your own, going and braving an improv group you wanted to go to, going to a book club, going fishing, playing football. It doesn't have to be, for me, it's a meditation thing. So I book something every month. Sometimes it's a massage. Sometimes it's going to somebody else's meditation session. Sometimes it's going to somebody else's gong bath or sound experience. A lot of them end up being learning and CPD, for big tick towards my British School of Meditation membership. But I don't do it for that tick. I do it because it fuels me. And again, scheduling that time in for me helps me find balance. This week, it was wild swimming.
Oh,
So it wasn't meditating in there. It was a really pure, was invited to the opportunity. I've loved wild swimming in the summer, haven't braved it in the cold. And I met a wonderful lady through my son's school who is a proper ice swimmer, very hardy. And she said, come and join my group. And the exhilaration of doing that was my real wow moment.
that's
Hopefully there'll be
wonderful.
more.
Well, thank you, Judy. That's extremely helpful, useful, and wonderful that we can all join in, even if we're not with you, in your practice. We can try it ourselves, and we can, because Judy has given us that wonderful meditation. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I would chat to you all night, but we are coming to the end of our time together. So once again, thank you very much for joining us. And
Enjoy.
and everybody else who's joining us on the repeat or tonight live. Blessings to you all. Arwen from the Celtic couple who are with you this evening, and good night.
Good
Thank you.
night. Thank you.